What if my life has been wrong? The death of Ivan Ilyich is not simply a story about dying, it is a story about how one has lived. Ivan Ilyich is a successful judge. He enjoys social respect, professional stability, and a life that appears correct by all standards. His existence is built on propriety, conformity, and social approval. He believes he has lived exactly as one should. After a minor accident, Ivan develops a mysterious illness. Doctors offer no clarity. His family avoids the truth. Pain intensifies. What begins as physical suffering turns into existential terror. The illness exposes a crack in the structure of his life. As death approaches, Ivan is forced to reflect. Career advancement, status, comfort, and appearances suddenly feel empty. What torments him most is not death itself, but the suspicion that his life was fundamentally false. Those around Ivan cannot face his suffering honestly. They maintain appearances, avoid discomfort, and deny death. Only Gerasim, a servant, meets Ivan's pain without pretense. Gerasim's presence is not pity, but truthfulness. In his final moments, Ivan experiences clarity. He realizes he lived for others' expectations, not his own moral truth. As he feels compassion for others, his fear dissolves. Death becomes not an ending, but an awakening. The death of Ivan Ilyich confronts modern obsessions with success, normality, and external validation. It asks a devastating question: have we truly lived our own lives? Now, let's explore how Ivan Ilyich's confrontation with death illuminates modern career paths, social definitions of success, and the urgent question of how to live before it is too late.
Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a story that's short, but man, does it pack a punch. It's a 19th century novella that, you'll see, holds a pretty stark mirror up to our lives today. We're talking about Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich.
Okay, let's just get right to the heart of it with maybe the most famous line from the entire book. It's a total paradox. Ivan Ilyich's life had been most simple and most ordinary, and therefore most terrible. I mean, think about that. How can a simple, ordinary life be the most terrible thing? It just doesn't seem to make sense, right? Well, that single haunting idea is exactly what Tolstoy spends the whole story trying to unravel for us. So to really get what he means by that, we have to start where Tolstoy starts. And interestingly, it's not with Ivan's life, but with his death. The whole book kicks off with the news that he's passed away. And believe me, the reactions from people, well, they tell you everything you need to know about the world he lived in.
And what's wild is that this isn't some dusty old book that no one cares about. It was written way back in 1886, but it still hits so hard for people today. Just look at this. Out of more than 222,000 ratings on Goodreads, a whopping 78% are 4 or 5 stars. That's incredible. And I think it's because that terrible, ordinary life he talks about, yeah, it's something a lot of us can still see around us, maybe even in ourselves.
Okay, this is where you start to feel a chill. When his work buddies hear he's dead, there's no sadness. No, their first thoughts are about themselves. Who's getting a promotion? How will the department shift? Ugh, now I have to go to this funeral. And the kicker? That little thought in the back of their minds? Well, thank God it's him and not me. It's just brutal.
And it's not just his colleagues. Even his own wife, Praskovia, is pretty much immediately focused on how much money she can squeeze out of the government. So here's the big takeaway right from the get-go. This was Ivan's world. This is what he built and what he was a part of. A place full of totally shallow, self-serving relationships, where what matters is how things look, not how they actually feel. So that explains the cold reaction to his death, right? Now let's rewind and look at his life, which Tolstoy flat out calls a terrible and huge deception. It was a life that was basically all for show. See, Ivan's whole deal was doing everything properly. His life was completely dictated by what high society expected. He picked his friends based on their social standing, he got married because, well, that's what you're supposed to do, and he buried himself in his job to get away from any drama at home. He was a master at building these walls around himself to keep anything messy or unpleasant or, real from getting in. And Tolstoy really sets up this huge conflict between two ways of living. You can see it laid out here pretty clearly. On one side, you've got the artificial life, all self-interest, appearances, materialism. On the other, the authentic life, compassion, empathy, real human connection. Ivan's life? It was lived 100% on the left side of that chart. And what Tolstoy is getting at is that a life like that, a life without real compassion, is just empty.
But then, this perfect artificial world he built starts to crack. And it all begins with something so ridiculously small, so ordinary. He falls off a ladder while hanging some curtains. That's it. And that silly little accident leads to a terminal illness. Suddenly, all that messiness and unpleasantness he spent a lifetime avoiding has literally invaded his own body. Now, the physical pain is awful, for sure, but what truly tortures him is psychological. It's this thing the book calls the lie. Everyone around him, his family, his doctors, they all keep up this charade. They pretend he's just sick, not that he's, dying. They put on these fake, cheerful faces, and all it does is make him feel completely and utterly alone with his pain and his fear. Tolstoy does this brilliant thing as the illness gets worse. He literally shrinks Ivan's world. I mean, first, he was a prosecutor moving all over the country. Then, he's stuck in his house. Then, just in his study. And finally, his entire world is just this one sofa. It's this powerful metaphor for his growing isolation and how he's just trapped, waiting for the end. So there he is, totally alone with this terror. And his mind is just racing, desperately trying to find some kind of meaning in all of this. He's just asking himself over and over, what is it for? At first, he tries to fight it. He clings to this idea that he did everything right, properly. He's trying to justify his entire existence, asking, wait a minute, haven't I lived the way you're supposed to? But the more he pushes, the more he realizes the whole foundation of his life is rotten. There's just nothing there. And then, this absolutely awful thought starts to creep into his mind. What if? What if that whole correct life was just completely wrong? It's this gut-wrenching moment where he realizes that while he was so busy playing the game, climbing the corporate ladder, making everything look perfect, real life was just passing him by. All of this questioning builds up to this one final, shattering moment of clarity right in his last few hours. It's agonizing, but in a strange way, it's also what sets him free.
And here it is, the big epiphany. He gets it. He finally understands that his life wasn't real at all. It was just one terrible and huge deception. By building all those fences to keep out the bad stuff, the unpleasantness, he accidentally fenced out all the good stuff too. He hid from himself what it means to really live and what it means to die.
So what finally breaks through? It's not some grand philosophical argument. It's something so simple, so real. His little boy comes in, kisses his hand, and just cries. And in that moment, for the very first time, Ivan feels pity for someone else. He feels for his son. He even feels for his wife. He stops thinking about himself, and boom, all those walls he built just come crumbling down. And with that one moment of pure empathy, his fear of death just disappears. He says to himself, death is finished. It is no more. What he means is that the spiritual death he'd been living his whole life is finally over. It's replaced by this feeling of light and joy. And right there, in his last few seconds on Earth, he finally figures out what it means to actually be alive. So after all that, what are we supposed to take away from this? It's a pretty intense story. What's the lesson Tolstoy wants us to find in Ivan's terrible, ordinary life? Well, the message is pretty clear and pretty powerful. A life without real compassion, without genuine human connection, is basically a wasted life. It's a kind of spiritual death that happens long before your body gives out. Think about it. It's the ultimate warning against keeping up with the Joneses. Or maybe today, it's about curating that perfect fake life on social media. Tolstoy is screaming at us that if you live only for appearances, you're going to end up terrified and completely alone when it really counts. And that's why this story still resonates. This Goodreads reviewer really nails it. We are all Ivan Ilyich. We're all wrestling with these same big questions. The whole point of the story is to force us to ask the question Ivan only asked at the very end, to look at our own lives and ask, are there any proper deceptions I'm living? Am I really living? Or am I just putting on a show? In the end, Ivan's story is just a mirror, and it leaves us with one heck of a question. What do you see when you look into it? Yeah, it's not a comfortable question to ask, but Tolstoy's point is that it's an absolutely essential one, if we want to find a life that actually means something before our time is up. Thanks for watching The Explainer.